Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Prepared. Let's talk about sleeper cells. I know, like, sleeper cells is one of the scariest terms ever utilized in kind of personal security because the idea of sleeper cell is worst case scenario. Sleeper cell, when I think sleeper cell, I think 9/11, September 11th, 2001. I was a young sergeant in the Army, and when you have 19 people who literally were in the country with one goal, one objective in mind, and then they were activated, you can't really get ahead of that. There's nothing overt about it. It is very covert and very dangerous as a tactic in terrorism, especially. I don't know if you guys know this, but a few days ago was the 40th anniversary of the attack in Beirut, Lebanon. That was a suicide bombing that left 241 service members deceased. A little bit before my time, it happened in 1983. I was just a wee little lad. But these type of things that are happening right now have kind of always happened. I mean, I know for a lot of people, especially young people, this seems very new. But if you're 40 years or older, you grew up in this world. I mean, you grew up in the first World Trade Center attack, Black Hawk Down in Somalia in 1993, Panama and Grenada, the first Desert Storm, and then September 11th. And then the last 20 plus years have been intertwined with terrorist acts in France, in Europe, period, all over the world. And so periodically we've been dealing with this. It's just more significant of an issue now because we have a potential war effort on several fronts, and we're committing a lot when we don't seem to have the resources for our own citizens. Now, last month in September, 230,000 total illegals crossed the border. That was a statistic from a year ago. 260,000 crossed the border this month alone. Now, when I think about that, I'm like, man, that's unfathomable that that many people can be crossing the border. What's even more dangerous is the fact that foreign citizens, not just Mexico, because we always think it's like a Mexico thing. It's like, yeah, they're just trying to come over here for a better life. And I get that. The large, overwhelming majority, as we saw in Arizona when we were on the border, talking to people that were literally being smuggled in the back of a vehicle by an American. They just want a better life. They want to work, bring money home, and live a better life and quality of life for their families. I get that. But like Sheriff Mark Lamb said, if you had a 10% probability, if you had 10 guys that were illegally crossing the border, and one of them, there was a chance that one of them was a pedophile or a murderer, a rapist, would you let them sleep in your house? And that's what we're doing. And so you don't have a wall, you don't have good policy, you don't have good leadership, and what you have is not just illegals coming from Mexico, but illegals coming from all over the country. Last month, 30 Iranians came across the border. It's actually 30 plus is the statistic as noted. So, it could be 39, near 40. That's a huge number for 1 month of Iranian. I mean, the equivalent to Iranian would be North Korean. Right? I don't even think, I wouldn't even put Russia in that category. I mean, Iran and North Korea are like they're in a tethered, bundled situation in the axis of evil. It's like those two countries hate America the most, and they've proven that. I don't know the Korean War, you see that? I don't know the Iranian backing of Hamas and Hezbollah killing Americans in the global war on terror in Iraq. We saw that. It's been proven. The links are there. 2 of the 30 plus terrorists, I shouldn't say terrorist, 30 plus people that came across illegally, likely released back into the country because they sought asylum. 2 of them came up hot because they were on the terrorist watch list. So when I take this idea of like sleeper cell, worst case scenario, guys, we are closer to that eventuality than we've ever been besides September 10th of 2001. because we are not tracking what's going on in this country. Our priorities have shifted where this proposed $105 billion new budget has $14 billion for the wall build, which is ironic that we're actually talking about, like, getting back to the root of it. How do we address this problem? Let's build a wall. Yeah, we've been saying that for years. 60 plus billion of that $105 billion is going to Ukraine. And then obviously going to support what's going on in Israel. The thing that I'm most concerned with in a sleeper cell activation is we've released a lot of people. And for people who don't understand kind of the sleeper cell and what that is, imagine you're indoctrinated. I saw a documentary yesterday. It's actually a really good documentary. I recommend checking it out on Netflix about the Boston Marathon bombing. Look, in Boston, 3 innocent people were killed, including an MIT police officer, after they were attacked in a twofold pressure cooking improvised explosive device from 2 known entities who had some history in their hometown or home country of Kyrgyzstan. They believe the older brother was radicalized, and then he decided on his own from education that he got that he was going to create these pressure cooker bombs and cook them off with his little brother on the Boston Marathon, at the finish line of the Boston Marathon. So I kind of tuned into this, and part of the plot they create in this documentary is that there were some in the FBI who thought this is an isolated incident. And there were some, including people in Boston, the commissioner in Boston, who thought this is a larger activation. These guys were not only radicalized overseas, but they had a plan and they had specific training. I agree with that. I don't agree with the FBI analysis of what took place. I know this because if I take the culmination of my academic experience in counterterrorism, I have a bachelor undergraduate degree in crisis response and homeland security, but also taking my experience from targeting and dealing with terrorism, I would much more lean on the side that these guys were radicalized overseas, trained overseas, and then activated as sleeper cells to conduct an attack. Now, if you're recruited as being part of the jihadist movement to kill infidels, non-believers, that inspires you. I mean, the periodical, that is the propaganda arm of Al-Qaeda, is called Inspire, because they're convincing men, mostly young men, that dying for their cause and martyrdom is more significant than your journey, any journey that you could expect in life. And so when they come here, just like 19 Saudis came here, started getting virtual training on simulators and used box cutters, not bombs, not bullets, but box cutters to act and kill more Americans than any time before in history in one attack besides Pearl Harbor. That's crazy. It's mind-boggling. Now imagine that where we had 19, I think it was more than that. There's speculation that there was more activations. They just didn't get the job done, or they cowered out. Imagine that times hundreds, maybe even thousands. And then take a reckless, porous border that's destroying our country in many ways, drug overdoses, crime, etc., violence, etc., and then take that activation, even in a small dose. A couple of people in certain densely populated areas creating casualties, hit and runs. I mean, I was in DC when the DC sniper was killing innocent people, and the chaos and calamity that created. It's one of the protocols and doctrine that makes snipers so effective on the battlefield because it has a psychological impact. So you take a couple people in the first phase to activate. They're not caught. They just spray up a crowd. They do so in coordination with one another. And then how does the country react? The country locks everything down and gets paranoid. You know, one of the lessons learned out of Israel for the 14 plus 100 people that were killed, that were massacred, was they had the wrong protocol because they weren't planning for the worst case. They were planning for the rocket attack. They weren't planning for the rocket attack in conjunction with a direct attack. And so the locking mechanism wasn't enough to stop somebody shooting out the locking mechanism and then throwing a frag in the room, burning out the structure and murdering everybody. And they paid for it. Now think about this in your own circumstance. If you don't have a preparedness plan to defend your life against multiple attackers, multiple assailants, and complex attacks, you're wrong. You know, my mind, since I've been teaching civilians over the last decade with Fieldcraft Survival and my band of merry instructors, I've changed a lot about how I think about this. If you're a civilian, you should have all the things. You should have the night vision, you should have the infrared lasers, you should have the M4, because if you don't, because you subscribe to some kind of mentality that you're paranoid, you're in the wrong, you're not radical, you're not extreme, so you won't have that, then you'll be just a victim. You'll be just like a number of the houses where everybody in those homes were drug out and massacred because the IDF, because the police, nobody was coming to save any of those people because they didn't have enough capability, enough capacity, and enough time. So yeah, we should pay attention. And yeah, we should be prepared. Because the worst case scenario is a very intelligent enemy is handing us our ass right now. Right now, it tends to be a propaganda campaign in warfare. I mean, can you imagine if Russia was responsible for the attacks and supporting Hamas activate this issue on the ground, which caused us to divert all of our resources? And how many times have you heard about Ukraine in the last 2 weeks in the national media? Me? Zero, because it's no longer a priority. We have a government that's completely broken, no Speaker of the House. We can't even vote on legislation. We have a downturn economy that's in a recession, that's likely to continue to be in a recession. Goods across the board are more than they've ever been. Food, utilities, cars, everything. And then we have a situation where we are getting more scarce in our available resources because we're outsourcing it to fight everybody else's war. Now, I've taken a lot of criticism from people who think I'm anti-Muslim. Look, I'll tell you from the heart, I'm not. And I know I'm not. Guys, I built a mosque in 2005 in a 9-month rotation in Afghanistan with my bare hands, with my Afghan counterparts, because I loved those men. I respected their religion. And the reason I did that wasn't because that was the standard. That was the doctrine. That's what I learned in the Q course. It's because I love people. And I grew to respect people of all faith, especially people of the faith of Islam, because I saw the peaceful side of that religion. In Yemen, Pakistan, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, all across the world where I worked side by side, fighting with Muslims against a common evil, which was terrorism. Guys, the common evil was terrorism. Now, I understand the perspective, which is why, I'm open to the criticism because I'm a public figure. I get it. And I'm willing to defend myself to a point. But what I realize is most of the people who have criticized me, mostly in my direct messages, a lot in comments about taking the side of Israel, already has a confirmation bias via their life experience or their religion. And I get it. I mean, if you look at the Palestinians, let me give you an example. Look at the Palestinians in Gaza. In 2007, Hamas took over as the government running Gaza. Hamas has existed since the 80s as a terrorist organization. Where is the PLO? Where's the Palestinian Authority? They're not in Gaza. They're in Jordan. They're elsewhere. 70% of Jordan is Palestinian. The king of Jordan, King Abdullah, said, I'm not going to allow any of those refugees in our country, and neither is Egypt. How much do they campaign for their own? Also, I want you to understand that the attack on Israel was a terrorist attack, massacring women and children, right? It was a free-for-all. To be honest, if Hamas would have targeted military targets, and that was their only MO, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. It would just be a blip on the radar in the national media, and that's just what happens because that's what they've been doing forever. But they didn't. They murdered and massacred babies. And the nuance of whether or not they did it one way versus another way is irrelevant to me. Because if you're a terrorist, you're a terrorist. And when you're a terrorist, even as a designation or not, you're lumped into a pile. And the only way you could be dealt with, just like ISIS, just like Al-Qaeda, just like the Taliban, is targeting them, killing them, and hopefully capturing them to get more intelligence to kill more. Now, 5,000 civilians in Palestine, I apologize, not in Palestine, in Gaza have been killed. That's the number. I don't know if that's factual, but let's say it's close to that. I'm willing to believe, obviously I've seen the videos and the imagery like you have. Now, I also believe that Hamas, just as they've literally said in interviews with Vice, they put civilians in harm's way because one team, one fight, right? The hospital that was supposedly bombed out, that the national media ran with, which never happened, by the way, which was proven to be by multiple sources, including Al Jazeera, that literally showed the video of the rocket launching and then straying and impacting in the parking lot of the hospital. That hospital, by name, by geolocation, has been known to be a Hamas headquarters forever. Why? Because Hamas are terrorists. They don't care about innocent life. So they're willing to put their headquarters underneath a hospital. Admittingly, the two people that were recorded talking in conversation that were Hamas said they launched the rockets from the back of the cemetery behind the hospital, which is illegal. Land warfare has ethical, moral, and legal protocols. I know it's hard to believe when you're facing an insurgency or terrorist who don't believe in anything except murdering and massacring and terrorizing. It's what they do. Lastly, I'll make the point that I do think Israel's campaign is flawed. I think several of my peers have talked about this, including Jocko. I actually haven't heard the Jocko piece, but somebody said that he had said something about it. Look, when you're fighting a war and you win in perception, you're fighting a propaganda war. Israel's war is on the ground because they want to protect the people, the citizens of their country. But they have to understand how important the information war is. And right now they're losing. I mean, yesterday I saw a video of appeared to be a reporter in Gaza wearing a helmet, transporting two infants that were severely injured in an attack, in an airstrike. No matter how pointed and surgical those airstrikes are, based on Hamas's MO, innocent people are going to die. I don't want to see that happen. And I think campaigning for them to continue to do that is a mistake. Like, they need to start rolling the machine and taking and occupying ground, and then targeting surgically with direct action, which slash hostage rescue, because 222 hostages still exist, despite Hamas releasing, a couple days ago, 2 elderly Israeli women who literally have helped Gazans that were injured across the border, who didn't look at race, religion. They looked at humanity and wanted to do the right thing. They got released. Their husbands are still in captivity, if alive. So they need to start striking surgically and reducing the number of casualties because they're losing the campaign. And eventually, they'll lose global support. The biggest mistake that could happen is Iran not understand the complexity of their campaign on multiple fronts, including in Lebanon and supporting Hezbollah. And we need to get back to basics, is the bottom line. I understand how we need to support counterterrorism efforts against terrorists who not just want to say death to Israel, but death to America. That's important. In my opinion, more important than Ukraine. Set that aside, let's talk about issues that we're dealing with in America. When you have 260,000 illegals crossing the border, what does that translate into? I don't know. The biggest fentanyl, the biggest homelessness, the biggest murder, violent crimes, issues that we've been dealing with in every metropolitan city in America. And how are we managing this? We're not. How are we managing this? We're not at all. I was on Santinello's YouTube channel. Apologize, I don't know the YouTube channel, but you can look it up. I think it's just his name. He was with a retired police officer of 30 years in Chicago. Illegal immigrants are occupying every police department in Chicago. Not a shelter for immigrants, but the police departments, they're being used as shelters. And that's mind-blowing. I personally will be going to LA next week with my media guys because we want to document what's happening on the ground. I talked to my buddy Jack Osborne, the son of Ozzy Osbourne, and we talked about the situation in LA and how it's degraded. We know this. You heard Joe Rogan talk about Skid Row. You've seen Santinello and others from YouTube walk the streets, but it's getting worse. I mean, right now, there are designated real estate agents in Los Angeles who are providing housing to the homeless. But as Santinello reports in Chicago, a lot of the people that are homeless don't want to be housed because they're using their Social Security checks, their Veteran Affairs checks, and they're getting the money, they're using the drugs, and they don't want the responsibility because the drugs are where they get the high, and the streets is where they get the drugs. They want to stay on the streets, overwhelmingly. What is this leading to? A crisis on multiple fronts that we want to document, that we want to show and demonstrate. I do want to mention, a lot of you guys have asked us about, prepared, training. What are we doing next? Guys, there are a lot of people in the country who are now running preparedness survival companies. It's the worst time to start a business, by the way, but there are a lot of companies, small and big, that are doing this. Do that. Do as much training as you can across the board. We started an application just because a lot of guys can't fly to the specific locations that we're training in. We're training in Utah, we're training in Arizona, we're training in Southern California, we're training in very specific places. And I want to make sure that you guys have access to it. So we started an app. We worked very hard for it. The guys in the back, the team right now is doing content for the app in all things. Because it's not just about shoot, move, communicate. It's about building resilience. It's about raising your babies right. It's about primitive survival. It's about medical and first aid considerations. I got a first aid course November 19th coming up with Jerry in North Carolina, emergency survival. It's on fieldcraftsurvival.com. We have a primitive or a survival type course based in Utah that's December 2nd. And also, since you guys are bugging the hell out of me, mostly young men are bugging the hell out of me about it, and I'm seeing an uptick in military movement, I'm bringing back Special Operations Prep course. I taught, one of the first things that I taught Fieldcraft Survival was Special Operations Prep course in tactical because it was my background, that's what I did. I started outsourcing everything else because I thought just that wasn't enough, and I don't think it is enough. But a lot of men and women now are looking at what's going on, and I personally think we'll be involved with boots on the ground in Israel. I think it's inevitable. Hezbollah, the drones launched from Yemen from the Houthis that are Iran-backed, the rockets that are launched from Hezbollah out of Lebanon, which are Iran-backed, and Hamas still doing Hamas things, backed by Iran. Iran to stay out of this fight is going to be very difficult. And if they get involved in the fight, you better believe the 10,000, I believe I saw a news report that 10,000 troops, it was a news segment piece where it's showing them arrive, are being staged in Saudi Arabia. A Marine Expeditionary Unit, battleship carriers, the whole gambit are on standby. Even the big 82nd Airborne Division, 173rd, all these guys are on alert because it's only a matter of time before they're activated and they're headed into the region, and you need to be prepared. A lot of you guys now are going to be going in the military. You're going to see this, and you're going to want to serve, and I feel like it's in our best interest to prepare you for that worst case scenario. The course is December 2nd and December 3rd. It's a weekend. We focused on all the attributes that you need to be in special operations, getting some of the technical skill sets and some of the exposure to some of the things that you're going to have to go through. So it's not just for people who want to join the military. I mean, I've had a dentist go through it, and he changed his practice and changed his life based on the experience he had. But we're bringing it back. I'll be including myself based on being a Green Beret. I'll be including Devin, who runs Performance and Recovery Group in the back of Fieldcraft HQ. He's a former 75th Army Ranger. I'll be including John Park, former South Korean Navy SEAL. Be including Greg Lappin, a former OGA contractor and police officer. That's going to bring all of our talents to bear to get you best prepared for your special operations experience, or just life, guys. Just life. I want to say thank you so much. I appreciate you guys. I'm headed off to the underground. If it wasn't for the patrons that support this channel, I wouldn't be able to do this, period. It means a lot to me. I'm doubling down on this. Like all the travel that we're accumulating, that we'll be using to go to LA, to be doing a tour with Jack Osborne and showing you the ground truth, is because of the Patreon support I get on patreon.com/Mike Glover. I'm off to the underground to give you a little bit more value on that, and then to do some tier 1 content for you in the back for all my tier 1 subscribers. If you haven't heard, we do have a subscription coupon code for the Black Rifle Coffee subs. It's MikeForce20, save you 20% off. I appreciate you guys, and until next time, peace out, guys.